Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about having an empty 8th house in a natal chart. Now, first thing I want to do is clear up any possible misperception or misconception regarding this. Now, if somebody has an empty 8th house in a natal chart, it doesn't mean that you're not going to experience death. Doesn't mean that you won't inherit anything from someone, or say a family member, or you won't be tied, connected with insurance of some kind. Shared resources won't be involved in your life. What this really means is that you're generally not going to emphasize, you may not emphasize or accentuate these matters in your chart. The houses that have planets in them may be the areas that you may strongly emphasize and accentuate, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to have anything pertaining to the 8th house associated in your life during your lifetime. Now, if you have, I think the first thing you want to look at when you have an empty 8th house, look at the sign that is on the cusp of the 8th house. Now, let's take somebody that has jocular Sagittarius on the cusp of the 8th. Now, this could be a person that can be very philosophical, exuberant, expansive attitude in regards to sexual matters. It could be somebody that puts maybe a strong emphasis on matters connected with astrology, occult, supernatural subjects. There may be a strong emphasis on shared resources. These things may prove fortuitous for this person as well, because as we know, Sagittarius is out of the 12 signs, it's regarded as the lucky sign. So there are things to consider when you look at the sign on the cusp of the 8th house. Now, let's say somebody has Capricorn on the cusp of the 8th house. Now, this could be somebody that has a very stern, serious attitude in regards to matters connected with a sexual partner, things that are associated with insurance, inheritances. They will take very seriously, more likely than not. It could also indicate possible delays or restrictions in these matters in some cases. Now, if another thing that you want to look at, you want to look at where the ruler of that of the 8th house resides. And if somebody, say, has the ruler of the 8th house posited in the 6th house, this could indicate somebody that brings the subjects, perhaps connected with supernatural, astrology, occult matters into their workplace. I mean, I have the ruler of the 8th and the 6th. I should know. And virtually everywhere I've worked, I've talked about these matters with people. This person may also maybe bring the subject of death to their place of employment. Things connected maybe with astrology can impact the person, play a role in the person's daily routine. And it's also possible, since the 8th house rules death, that the person may die of some kind of debilitating illness. Now, let's say somebody has the ruler of the 8th house posited in the 12th house. This is could be a person that brings things connected with perhaps astrology, occult, supernatural matters into their private life. Could also indicate that perhaps maybe dealing with death, or the way it's dealt with, could be perhaps the person's self-undoing. It could show somebody that brings maybe some ability to research things extensively into their private life, and this may be done perhaps in solitude and seclusion. The person may die perhaps in some cases maybe in a hospital, and in some isolated cases maybe even in incarceration in a prison. So these are things to look at. And somebody has an empty 8th house, as I stated before, doesn't mean the person's not going to have any activity in connection with these matters. Now, let's say, also another thing to look at, if you have a heavily aspected Pluto in your chart, that'll indicate could indicate a lot of activity in connection with the matters that are correspond with Pluto in the 8th house. So that's another thing to consider. I have a number of aspects made to my Pluto in my natal chart. I actually have the 8th house empty in my natal chart, so that is something it's interesting. But I have Sagittarius on the cusp of the 8th, and you know, with Sagittarius, things aren't done in a light way. They could be done in a very exorbitant manner, if you know what I'm saying. So that might help to some degree. Anyway, some things also to look at. If you have, say, transits going into your 8th house, this can indicate more activity than generally indicated by an empty 8th house. Now, or more activity in matters connected with the 8th house. If somebody, say, has Jupiter transiting the 8th house, it could indicate perhaps the person may get some kind of inheritance during that period. There may be some benefit, perhaps from life insurance, maybe gains through doing something in connection with astrology, occult, supernatural subjects, gains perhaps. It could be fortuitous for things in connection with others' resources. You may get a prodigious amount of help from another person during this period. Might be good for emotional support even. And also look at the progressed chart and see if you have any planets occupying the 8th house, because this could indicate some activity in matters pertaining to the 8th house. So that is also something that you want to look at and consider when having an empty 8th house in your natal chart. Well, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment for having an empty 8th house in a natal chart. Stay tuned next time, where I'll be dissertating and talking about having an empty 9th house in a natal chart. Two things I want to get with you on before I head out. Firstly, the stars may impel but do not compel. And secondly, never isolate any single astrological element, aspect, planetary placement, position, configuration, influence, or what have you, and make an analysis of a person, astrologically speaking, based on this alone, because a person astrologically is the sum of all their components in their natal chart and not just one. Until next time, people, stay well.